franchise secrets, Erik Von Horn.
In this episode of Franchise Secrets, I have my friend Klaus on. And Alex was a franchisee with Massage Envy. Went as a franchisee, was on the franchise advisory board, and was with Massage Envy as a franchisee when they formed a franchisee association. So this topic of conversation is a little bit more serious, a little bit more tactical than what we usually have, but very important. We talk about a franchise advisory board and a franchisee association. They're two very different things. One's kind of franchisor led, where the franchise advisory board, that's where they put a board together and kind of one voice to speak on behalf of the franchisees to give the franchisor feedback, et cetera. Franchise association is more of a legal entity. It is a legal entity, and it usually comes along after the franchise advisory board. So we got into all of that. Like, when should franchisees think about forming a franchisee association? Just because somebody is forming a franchisee association with a franchisor, should franchisees really get behind it? Is it dangerous? Is it good? Why did they form it? And so there's a lot that goes into that. So as franchisees, you don't want to just jump into an organization like a franchise advisory board. A franchise association, but you might want to. And so we get into all of that. And he's got a lot of experience with this, and he has experience, and he's talked to a lot of people about this. So I think this will be a very tactical episode on franchisee associations and franchisee advisory boards. Alex, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Erik.
For sure. We've known each other for quite a while. And then you hopped into the franchisee mastermind and the tribe of investor mastermind. So getting to know each other more, and be meeting face to face here, before the end of the year. And I just know that you've done a lot in the franchising world. We have a lot of mutual friends, and I know that, you've been working on like a franchisee association. And it's a question that I get so often. It pops up in the Facebook group and whatnot. And you so graciously said, "Hey, let's do a podcast on this." And I was like, yes. So here we are. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. That is a new rabbit hole for me too. So I saw and was involved in a number of processes over the years with different brands, and so as this effort came together and became to be felt like we need to do something as a group of franchisees. And this seemed like almost like the last resort, so to speak. It's been a really interesting journey. Who signs up for a volunteer job with hundreds of hours and like zero pay, man? So, the pay, I think, is for the network ultimately for all of the franchisees involved. But it's a really cool rabbit hole. I'm glad we get to talk about it today.
And the education that you get from it, I'm sure you're going to you won't make everybody happy. It's like, why do people run for public office? I was in a county commissioner's meeting the other day because someone's trying to put in a big 200-acre gravel pit next to us. I'm like, that's not happening. And all these commissioners up there, they're like volunteering for this job, and they're all like well-respected people in the community. And then it's like half of the people hate them in there and half of the people love them, or that's going to flip. So I'm like, why do you guys sign up for this stuff? So it's the same as you, like, why did you sign up for this? But I think there's a bigger picture, and you're going to learn a ton through it. And so let's just kind of get started. Let's go back to like your journey in franchising first before we hop into that, because you were with Massage Envy for a while, right?
Right. Yeah. I was young and green. So before Massage Envy, I was actually an analyst for like small and micro cap publicly traded companies. And at some point had some conversations with friends, and I realized, wait a minute, there's this private market called franchising. And there's lots of information that isn't easily available. So you need to do like good scuttlebutt research, understand what the different stakeholders say about the model. And if you do a really good job, you can actually find really great business models to invest into at, low valuations compared to, over time building businesses. And so that got me started. 2007 is when I became a franchisee with Massage Envy. And so it's been just a beautiful journey ever since.
So where did you start? Where was your first location?
Yeah, in Columbia, South Carolina. So Charlotte was pretty much sold out at the time. So I said, hey, I'm young. Where's opportunity? There's licenses available. I'll go there. I'll open stores there. Let's do it.
That's exactly what I did with Liberty Tax back in the day. I'm like, where can I go? And I started in Kansas City, and I wish it would have taken me to Columbia. You got nice lakes there, better weather, all kinds of stuff. But so you got started in Columbia, and then like, did you grow beyond one location, and like how many did you grow to, and how long did it take you?
Yeah, famously hot Columbia, South Carolina. I'm telling you. So couple of locations, and it was actually an option for me to grow to a third and a fourth location. And as young and inexperienced as I was, in hindsight, I would have said, "Wow, I should have absolutely done that," and I didn't. Right? And so it's these like errors of omission that we sometimes have in our track record, where we feel like, "Oh man, had I just made that move." So no, it's stood with 2 locations. I think at the height we had about 78 employees, and it was a wonderful journey. I loved the brand. It was a really great journey.
When you were there and when you sold, did they have a franchise association there? Because I believe they do now, but did they when you were there?
Yeah. So what happened was that in 2015, a large private equity firm bought the brand.
Was that Rourke?
And yes, it was indeed, right? And these guys are, I mean, you have to give it to them. They are super sophisticated. They know exactly what they are doing. And, to be fair, here is, I don't know, like 600 franchisees who love the brand, had 10 years of really fantastic time building the brand, really high trust in the organization, right? And Roar came in, and I actually served on so we had what was called the National Franchise Advisory Board within the organization, where franchisees, get to work with the franchisor. And I worked on the profitability committee. And so we saw the system-wide EBITDA margin drop in 3.5 years from 18.2% over the next 3 years, from 2015 down to 11.2.
So you went from, the EBITDA margin went from 18% to 12%-ish?
Yeah, a little lower, right? And so
Not
you
good.
wonder, like, there's no economic driver here that is creating that. What in the world happened, right? And you look back.
Did revenue go up proportionally to that? Like, did Rourke do anything to help increase overall revenue that made kind of the EBITDA number similar to what it was 3 years before?
Yeah, so the answer there is no. Revenue was actually still growing.
No.
Right? So revenue was growing, bottom line was shrinking. It was like, wow, what is happening here? And really, in hindsight, when you look at those years, they really did a masterful job of profit engineering the entire P&L, man. So we went down from
wait a second. So profit engineering the P&L from at the franchisor level or the franchisee level, or both?
Well, for the franchisor and our P&L, all the line items where we would spend money on anyways, our costs increased manyfold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lotion, right? Now you have a required vendor. Everything costs 3 times more.
Required vendors are like required vendors. Sometimes it's necessary, but required vendors are not like. Yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing when you have to use certain vendors. Right. So you were on that. So what happened? So 3 years, you saw there's a delta of like 5% in that EBITDA margin. What was the solution? Like, what were those conversations like?
Well, so my understanding was that the NFAB at some point started to really talk to the franchisor and say, "Hey, look, you're deteriorating our business. What's up with that?" And ultimately, what happened was that this corporate NFAB structure that was designed, ultimately bylaws written by the franchisor, ended up not having any teeth to stop them. It was like a suggestion box. They could say, "Hey, we'd love you to change this and change that, and this is not really friendly to us franchisees. Can we change that?" But those were taken as nice suggestions, and most of them discarded, and that was that. And so ultimately, franchisees banded together and said, "Well, hey, the only thing that we can do to kind of draw a healthy line here and say, hey, we also need to live," right? That happened to be a franchisee association.
And then were you part of that association, or did you just I mean, a part of
Yeah, I was
as a member, but were you part of the formation of it at all?
no. That was one brave, amazing lady who started it, and I take my hat because she, now I'm in similar shoes, and just takes so much time and so much effort and so many conversations, and I actually called her a few months ago and said, hey, what do I need to look out for? How do we do this right?
Well, let's have that conversation then, because we're going to be talking in general terms, things that you learned at Massage Envy, things that you learned from her, things that you've learned by talking to other people that have formed associations and whatnot. So the discussion that we're having right now is not necessarily about a specific brand. To be clear, it is not about Massage Envy, and it's not about any specific brand. We're talking about experience that Alex has, experience that he's gleaned from others. And so I just want to be clear with everyone out there listening to this. This is not necessarily about a specific association that he is a part of today or maybe in the future. These are just generic conversations that he's been having, that he has experience with, and he's gleaned from others. So when do franchisees need to start looking at doing a franchise association? And to be clear, what's the difference between a franchise association that's started by franchisees versus a group that the franchisor puts together?
Yeah. How much time do we have? So in short, and I'll take a slightly different approach. Thanks for the disclaimer there, Erik. So I think the number one currency in any franchise system, please correct me if you have a different experience, Erik, is trust, right? That's the number one currency. And when trust is high, things work really well. And if for some reason over time, that deteriorates and there's no true win-win relationship anymore between franchisor and franchisee, that's when I would say there is a possibility that a franchisee association is actually a very healthy solution. Ultimately, where you want to end up is that a great franchisor has a great franchisee association and they build the brand together. That's in the end kind of the picture. And when you look at the large brands today, whether it be McDonald's or KFC or your Yum brands or even in like other spaces. So Massage Envy we mentioned earlier, right? European Wax Studio, like all of these large systems have franchisee associations, right? So yeah, that was a little start there. Now, I think if we want to look at when to start it, right? There is distinct phases of a franchisor's development, of a brand's development, where I would say starting a franchisee association may not make sense, which is actually the early stage, the startup phase, and then kind of the in-between stage where the brand grows, right? But once you reach like a large status, and that's a little different for each brand, right? But if you think of retail models, it might be about 500 units or so, right? In the startup phase, franchisees will do better over time if the brand gets built. So if they have a great experience, they're going to go out and tell their friends, tell their family, tell everybody who asks, like, this is a great brand, you should consider becoming a part of it, right? And so the franchisor at the time is in this kind of startup phase, maybe from 0 to, I would say, 80 to about 150 units or so. And that's when they ultimately become cash flow positive, right? And then the franchisor can see whether it makes sense for the brand to continue to grow. And if that's the case, then they will take the cash flows and start investing into more people, right? To scale up, to bring the right resources into the system, to build the brand so that it goes from, let's say the first 100 units to now 300, 400, 500 units to become truly national. And that's also what franchisees want, right? So the interests there are fully aligned. But then something happens that is, completely connected to the natural self-interest of the parties, which is, as a franchisor, you have an owner, right? And those owners, whether it's publicly traded or whether it's like a private equity firm or whoever, right? They're going to say, hey, build me shareholder value, right? And when you reach these larger number of units, the franchisor can much, much more easily make more money by changing agreements with the franchisees and making money from all of the existing units rather than just adding more fresh new units.
They have to pull different levers to make more money, and making more money doesn't necessarily mean adding more franchisees, doesn't necessarily mean adding more revenue to existing franchisees. There's other levers that private equity companies and just franchise organizations can pull that increase enterprise value of the franchisor that are not necessarily a win-win situation with the franchisee.
Yeah. And so, just to add to that, so this doesn't necessarily need to be an adversarial thing, right? This is just like in the nature of things, an evolutionary step, so to speak, in that process of becoming a large national, maybe even multinational franchisor, that at some point, that the interest for profit is just, on two different sides.
What did you glean from that conversation with that lady that started the one with Massage Envy? Because that couldn't have been easy. You think about a big brand, a brand that is with a large private equity company. Rourke is huge, and then you got I'd have to think like a small franchisee, and thinking the franchisor thinks I'm the ringleader, pulling everybody together to be adversarial and bringing in the troops and trying to wrangle the troops to have an adversarial relationship with the franchisor. So that's, I have to think like that was probably some of what she was up against in her own mind, because there's probably not a lot of people that volunteered for that job.
Right. And to be clear, her intentions, and I think the intentions of any franchisees, is not to be adversarial. At no point in time. It's always, hey, wait a minute. How come, I put up my money to build this? How come I built this brand in the territory that I'm in? And now, I get taxation without representation. My voice is no longer being heard. So how can I reignite that my voice is actually being heard? And so it's often the franchisor who, in the first steps in responding to an association, understanding that there is now a group of franchisees that have an entity behind them that, will probably even out the power dynamic a little bit, right? They might see it as an adversarial step. But I think there's a lot of evidence that ultimately, when you get to that point of accepting an association, that there's much more value that comes from that than the opposite.
Yep, and there's going to be tension. It's going to be contentious at times, but the goal is to find, because you're not going to get everything that you want as a franchisee. You're not going to be able to get everything you want as a franchisor. So it's just like, it's a good thing. How would you describe, in your own words, that franchise association and the relationship that would be a positive one with the franchisor? So how would you just describe a franchise association?
Oh, hey, so an association ultimately has the opportunity to really bring franchisees together and help them become stronger as business owners, as entrepreneurs, create a shared experience and ultimately lift each other up. And so, part of that journey in my mind very much is not only to do that for franchisees, but also for the franchisor. What if they have a strategic aim that you no longer agree with, but you've now put hundreds, if not millions of dollars into your upfits and your people and brand, and you've operated it for 10 years, and something is now shifting? What do you do? And so franchisee association can help with that. Now, for the franchisor, just to say that real quick, you've been to the multi-unit franchise conference many times, I'm sure.
I was just there.
Right? Vegas, exactly.
But that was my first time. I haven't been many. That was my first time there.
Yeah. So there was a fantastic breakout session on franchisee associations. And, one of the things that was mentioned there is not only that little sentence that I shared with you earlier, right? Great franchisors have great franchisee associations, and they built the brand together. But also, there was a very clear understanding that large, sophisticated franchise investors will actually wait for this stage in the natural development of franchisors, that a franchisee association is fully in it and fully accepted and fully there as a as a like equal, so to speak, with the franchisor as a stakeholder with a full seat at the table, rather than a stakeholder who may or may not be fully listened to, right? And when that happens, actually, those large sophisticated investors, and sometimes even institutional, they will pour money into the brand. They will look to buy portfolios or to open new stores or to invest into the company if it's publicly traded or whatever, because they understand that this kind of tough phase of a franchisee association being established and becoming recognized and understood by the franchisor is now viable and creates an environment for them to have more certainty in their returns going forward.
I like that. Just great franchisors have great franchisee associations, and large, whether it's institutional money, institutional like private equity, or just large sophisticated franchisees kind of wait for a brand to kind of go through that phase to have that franchisee association. And you kind of never really thought about it like that. Okay. So now you're at a point where it's like, we have something. It's usually something that causes some strife in that relationship that is the trigger for that franchisee association to be formed. And there's a legal part of it. It's not just hey, let's form it and let's meet with the franchisor. Because Alex, I've been through the formation. I don't know that we ever got to it, but we talked to the attorneys and the groups that help people put this together. So I do have experience in this. It never got done in a specific brand that I was a part of, but there was contention, and there were franchisees that like it should have been done, but I don't think it ever got done. We talked to different attorneys and whatnot. So if a franchisee is thinking, hey, I think I need to start one of these associations, what are the steps?
Yeah. So in my mind, when it comes to intention, right, it needs to be something that's not a current problem. It needs to be bigger than that, right? It needs to be either a shift in strategy that would really, you look at 5 years and it's no longer in the best interest of all involved, or it would be, just really reaching a size in the franchise where you say, well, at this point, it makes sense for us to just have, to support the brand building process, because as franchisees, we need to professionalize as well. Now that the system is large and more sophisticated and the processes are more stringent, and it's more like a large corporation really at that point than a fun, entrepreneurial startup that everybody, loves to start with. And most systems are small. But once you do get to that large stage, you just got to become more sophisticated, if that makes sense.
So what's the first step? Is it a company that does this? Is it an attorney that you reached out to? Who was the call that you're working with today?
Yeah. So, it's and that's a good question. I mean, I just happen to be, the president of our franchisee association, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I did this by myself. So, if there's anyone out there wondering, like, how do I start this, right? I think the number one step is that you find other franchisees that are trying to solve problems in a well-intentioned manner. And when you find them, you might just start bi-weekly calls, right? Create a group of people that have a mindset to build things, to be productive, to be supportive, to figure out how can we solve these problems that we are encountering that we want to make better, not just on behalf of our own units, but on behalf of the network. And so that group over time can evolve into what some might call, and this was something that Vicky shared with me and I was so grateful for, is essentially like creating a steering committee. Don't go this path alone. You might have me here, on this podcast today as a single person, but I'm just a representative of many people that have been working on this, that have been dedicated to this over the course of, it's almost a year now, right? And really exhausting all other avenues to become thoughtfully and productively heard and problems getting fixed.
So kind of step one, find other franchisees that are wanting to help solve problems. You don't need to form an association. You need to kind of have that have that group of people that are solution oriented, not just a bunch of complainers. Guys, it's so easy to find a bunch of complainers out there that want to vocalize the problems and not do anything about it. Those guys are a dime a dozen. It's harder to find people that are truly wanting to help solve problems. And then from that, you are with these franchisees, and then kind of from that, you create a steering committee.
Yeah, I think, you ultimately go through a process of together figuring out the different problems, ultimately, potentially, arriving at the solution. Like, you think we are not getting around of starting a franchisee association. I think that's our only option, just to be clear. That's not a fun option. Like, no franchisee in their right mind would say, oh yeah, I can't wait to sign up for hundreds of hours of volunteer unpaid, right? I can't wait to figure out a way to get, more than 50% of all franchise units signed up to this thing, paying fees and wanting to make the thing better. That is nothing anybody ever said. So just to be clear there.
That's true.
Sometimes it feels like it's the only option that's left over.
So now you decided that you want to start one, or a group decides that they want to start one. Yeah. When do you tell the franchisor, this is what we're doing? Is it like serving them papers? Like, hey, we've got 50% of the vote, by the way. We're doing this thing. Like, what's the point of, like, we've got the steering committee, we've engaged with some attorneys, and to actually like telling the franchisor that you have a franchisee association?
Yeah, right. So when you do get to that step, you want to look for very credible, experienced attorneys that are in that space. There's some companies out there that are very well known. We happen to decide on Zarko, Einhorn, Zalkowski. They're out of Miami, have done a lot of work in this space, great track record. And so from there, you decide which state you're going to start in, and you're going to write the bylaws, and you get it started. Open the bank account, and you're in business, practically speaking. So those are the key steps there. And then we decided, we had some, conversation internally around how do we want to approach this with the franchisor. And
so did you start that with that group before you told the franchisor, or did they kind of know what was going on?
So we actually, so there was an effort amongst franchisees that started within that steering committee back in the fall, in our particular case, to actually share a letter that was signed by more than 50% of franchised units of some key items that we felt really needed resolved, please. And, when we got to a point of realizing that there wasn't an adequate response, that's when we took the next step. And once it was formed, by the way, we felt that it was the right and honest thing to do, to send a letter and essentially say, we want to inform you that this has just been formed and started. Now at that point, we have very, very few, if any, members other than people on the steering committee, but we felt it was the right thing to be open and honest about it, rather than operating without transparency, if that makes sense. So transparency is important for us. Yeah.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is, if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. So you're putting all this together. You're talking to the attorneys, and they're kind of advising you. And it's a smaller group, I'm guessing, less than 20 people as you're dealing with the attorneys. And then they're advising you on how to kind of move forward with it. And then you guys tried to just the franchisor didn't know you were doing this, and you were trying to get communication, open line of communication, open up with them, and them respect with the things that you had to say. That doesn't happen. And this is any brand. Like this is like the playbook. And this is very similar to what happened with us. That was met with no real meaningful conversation. So then you realize, well, this isn't going to get it done. And the attorneys say, well, it's probably time to start it. And here's what you need to do. You need to get a bank account. You need, what were the things that you needed to actually become a franchise association?
Well, I mean, technically, you just need the formation documents in, a state of your choice. And that's that, technically speaking.
You don't need, how much buy-in do you need from other franchisees? Do you need any?
No, I mean, everybody could start a franchisee association if they want it.
So you don't need buy-in, you just need, and how much did that cost roughly?
Oh, I mean, that's like starting an LLC. I mean, it's I don't know, $150.
But with the attorneys and the advisory that you got beforehand, that
Gotcha.
Wasn't free.
Right. No, so we wanted to do it right, and we obviously had a long-term plan in a way, right? We didn't want to start it and then let it fizzle out, but really put a thoughtful effort forward. So, I'm sure the law firms in our case, they just had like a package, right? A package deal. I think it was like 7.5 or something like that to really guide us for 3 months through the process. But just to be clear, the idea is not to like work with lawyers all the time, right? I mean, the idea is not litigation or anything. It's just to have good support, legal advice that can serve, a multitude of franchisees in a large system.
And tell me if this is true with the things that you've experienced and things that you've heard. When we were dealing with this, it was, we were having conversations with the attorneys like this, and they weren't like trying to talk us into it. They weren't like, they were just giving good, solid advice, not saying, oh yeah, you should do this. And this is how you do it. And, is more like advisory and seeing if there's other solutions versus like, hey, let's go get them. Let's form this thing and let's try to get some stuff shaken up. That wasn't the advice we were getting. We were getting like, this is the way that it could work. And you might want to try this first and try that first. What's been your experience out there as you've gone through it and you've talked to others with it?
Yeah, so it was somewhat similar. I mean, obviously their business is specialized in this field, right? They do nothing but franchising and usually on the franchisee side. So our experience was that they did walk us initially through to, just be careful on some of these items, do you really want to do this? And so ultimately it gave us some more pause to really think through, is this really the step that we want to take? And ultimately we said, yes, let's move forward. But it's not a foregone conclusion. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you've spent probably $10,000 up to this point, like to get with advisory from attorneys and less than 10,000, I would say. Yeah. And now you have an association and then you go and tell the franchisor. Is that kind of the playbook on this?
So initially, I mean, we decided that we wanted to be open and transparent with the franchisor and say, hey, we just want to inform you that we've done this.
So you did it. You said, we've done this, not we're going to, but we've done this. That's when you inform them.
Correct. I mean, that was really after a lot of different avenues were purely exhausted. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you were transparent. We've done this. Then from your experience and just experience, talking to other people that have done this, like what happens next? Because that's like a kind of a big deal. All of a sudden you go to the franchisor and you're like, hey, now you kind of have to listen to us in a way because we formed this franchise association.
Yeah. So actually for the next step, my experience with Massage Envy was so valuable. And, I can't think of the original founder and the current president of the Envy Owner Association enough for sharing their advice and their like missteps and so forth with me. So I could learn from that. One of the key items is that negotiation. Now it becomes this one-on-one conversation with other franchisees. Hey, we started the association. Do you want to sign up? And then the question is, of course, like, why do we need this? Like, don't we have other ways to communicate with the franchisor? Why do you feel that is important, right? And so it becomes this like really long drawn out process of one-on-one conversations that can really like diminish your opportunity to grow exponentially within, the network, you can't really use the email addresses. We felt that it would be fair if we email franchisees on their essentially franchisor's email address, right? Do we have their cell phone numbers? Do we have their personal emails? Like, how do we communicate broadly and effectively, right? That's a really important point. So based on our experience and how long it took with Massage Envy, we ended up designing a website. And so on that website, before we kind of went public and started a lot of, noisy conversations and back and forth, we just put everything on the website and essentially said, here are the reasons, we made it educational. We just said, hey, here are the reasons why at this stage in our franchise, ultimately, we do believe that we need this and we hope that you will join. And just made it very educational, very open, very transparent, made sure, there's no need to talk bad about the franchisor. Some people get a kick out of that. That was just not necessary. I don't feel that that's, professional to do either. And so we really wanted to keep it on the up and up. And then, last night, 4 weeks ago, the website went live. And today we have like 75% of 50% of the network signed up. So I think that's pretty successful in just the first month to, get to a substantial number of units, of the large network. That's usually a good thing. So we're proud and happy about that, and we know we got to get those other 25% too.
What's the franchisor's response? Whether it's this franchisor or the franchisors that you've kind of heard about, like what kind of response do you see once you've said, hey, we've got an association? Is it like, holy cow, you're kind of blacklisted, we really don't want to talk to you now? Or is it like, okay, now we have an official channel of kind of communication and let's proceed?
Yeah, I think that really depends on the intentions of the franchisor, right? So I can much more relate and have more experience when I look back at my Massage Envy experience, because the franchisor at the time really didn't want for franchisees to have a way to kind of stop what they were doing, right? And so they sent out, so usually it's utilizing, fear or disinformation or, even at times pressure if need be, if the franchisor doesn't want it, to say, look, these are just some disgruntled franchisees, don't listen to them.
And to be fair, that might be the case with certain franchisors.
Absolutely.
So as a franchisee out there, just because a group is starting a franchise association, it may not be done with the intentions that we're talking about right now. It could be done with other intentions. And so it isn't like blame the franchisor because they're not happy about a franchise association. That might be disgruntled franchisees that are just causing issues and whatnot. Or it might be a thing that is good to join. So like, just don't blindly go into it one way or the other, a yes or a no. Like, you've got to know who you're dealing with and why they formed it. So
the second step that I think many franchisors, or the ones that I'm aware of, let me put it that way, take is that, so usually in the first and second stage so for all the franchisors who are listening to this, right? One of the absolute best practices when you start your franchisor and when you grow it is to have basically a board of franchisees that is, duly elected, not appointed, but really elected by other franchisees that are people that are well respected in the system, have a lot of experience in your industry potentially, or in certain subject matter experts, whether it be marketing or operations or technology or whatever, right? And to really bring these individuals in close to corporate to learn from them, to really like hear what are the needs, how do we make this business model better together, right? And so at Massage Envy, it was called the National Franchise Advisory Board. It's a corporate structure. I alluded to it earlier, right?
So there's two different things we're talking about. We're talking about like the Franchise Advisory Board, and that's kind of franchisor-led, most of the time franchisor-led, not just appointed by the franchisor, but maybe some appointed by the franchisor and some appointed by the franchisee, or all appointed by the franchisees that they've elected. Usually it's kind of a combination there. So the franchisor can put some on and the franchisees can put some on. If it's just the franchisor, it's probably not as unbiased as you would think. But
Exactly.
that's a franchise advisory board, and I love it when franchisors have that. And that's a good channel of communication. But the other thing,
not just that, it really makes the business model stronger.
yes,
Right. I mean, if you tap into the entrepreneurial spirit of 600 franchisees out there, you will come up with solutions much better than, the 20, 30, 40 people that sit in the corporate office.
Mm-hmm. It's just a good channel of communication. I've been in brands that have had that, and I've loved it. I've been on that at different times.
Yep.
And most of the time I don't want to be on that because I hate meetings. And but I've always appreciated the people that were on it, and I've sat in on some of those meetings, and it's just a way for and again, this is talking about the advisory board, not an association. The advisory board, when they go in and talk to the franchisor, they can talk on behalf of their zone or their region or whatever it is. So they're talking on behalf of that, so they can talk about things, and it's not just one franchisee coming up with a complaint or issues or whatever, but they're saying, this is what we're hearing. This is what we're experiencing from my region. And then it's not so contentious necessarily. It is a good conversation and way for dialogue to happen.
Yeah. And, I want to add, basically, the franchisees who take so much of their time to serve on these boards, right? They are really well intended, most of them, right? Most of them really want for the brand and the franchisee to evolve and to grow. And an association, in my mind, if done right, has the exact same intention, right? So these organizations usually are, pursuing the same aim. Yeah.
Yep.
And what a franchisor does, coming back around to what you asked earlier, right? When the franchisor feels as though they need to respond in a contentious manner, they will essentially double down on this corporate NFAB structure and say, oh yeah, we don't like the association, but go ahead and, double down on the corporate franchise board, or advisory board,
All right, two different things: the advisory board and the franchise association. Let's go back to anything else that you'd want to add about the association.
The association. So
have you been on an association before?
Yeah. So at Massage Envy, I was involved as a member in one committee, but then
on that committee. So what do you think the franchise? Do you think it's kind of the same people that are on the advisory board that are a part of the association? Like, is the goal the same? Is it just more teeth that you have? And to an extent, like as a franchise association, they kind of have to listen to you, right? That's the thing. They don't have what are the teeth in the association versus the board?
Well, so a couple of questions in there, right? So first of all,
I'm just kidding. I'm like, there's a few of them in there, and I got more. So good thing you're stopping
awesome.
me.
Yeah. So the first part is I think that the initial constellation of who joins the association board, right, is very telling to franchisees, like how much experiences they're working with the franchisor. Are these professionals or are these the people that you hear complaining or something like that? And that's really important. Like, take a look at the first board and make up your mind if these are reputable, good individuals that you've heard good things about over the years. And then the second part is that I would always be in favor to have people that serve on the National Franchise Advisory Board also on the association board. In our case, we do have a couple of people that serve actively on the National Franchise Advisory Board and also join the association because they recognize, like, we all want the same thing. And with an association, we may have a way to actually get heard, because currently our experience is that we're not getting heard, even on the National Franchise Advisory Board.
I like it. All right.
Yeah.
So, what else on the association? Like, to kind of wrap that up full circle, you've got an association. Now what? Now, how does the communication work with the franchisor, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah. So I think some of that is determined by the franchisor. If they start actively either engaging with or isolating the association. So I think from an association standpoint, the next steps are, number one priority, have more than 50% of franchised units sign up.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Right? Because at that point, you can clearly claim, look, guys, we have the majority of franchised units that stand behind this association.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a very critical point.
Is it a legal point, or is it just kind of a, just because it's over 50%? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's meaningful to the franchisor as a message.
Yes.
Right. But at the same time, if it's below that, the franchisee association can still go ahead and operate. Right. But it's always going to feel like, oh, this is just, 30% or 20% of the network rather than the majority of the network.
Yep.
I think that's the difference there.
So
right?
Once you get that, then you feel like you have a voice to go to them. Do they have to listen to you?
Well, they will ultimately decide that, I think.
The franchisor will ultimately decide that.
Yes and no. So this is a little more complicated, right? So if it's more than 50%,
I like getting complicated. These are the questions that most people don't know. They don't, unless they pay an attorney a lot of money. So
right.
Yeah, let us know the complication.
Yeah. No. So one of the key items, of course, for an association is to enable franchisees to have collective bargaining power again. Right. If you're a single unit franchisee, or even if you have like a multi-unit portfolio somewhere, and you go to the franchisor and let's say your renewal is coming up and you say, hey, you put in some terms in there that are not favorable to me. I don't like them. Can we please negotiate them? Most franchisors, even though you can technically negotiate, they're going to say, well, sorry, pal, tough luck. This is what we're doing. And so once the association is formed, you can ask your lawyers to get in a ultimately it's like a collective bargaining process, right? To get into contact with the corporate lawyers, with the franchisor's lawyers, and to say, hey, look, guys, I know you're working on updating the FDD over time, right? We want to know what the changes are, and we want to start negotiation processes with you to figure out how we can benefit franchisees if you're taking something here, like something in return. So it becomes more of an evening of the process rather than the franchisor being able to put anything they want into the FDD.
So at the end of the day, you're able to communicate with one voice. Everybody might not agree on everything, but you're communicating with one voice and with a budget of a large group of franchisees paying for one attorney to be able to help with the negotiations versus everybody out on their own, which usually doesn't accomplish anything.
Right. And that's a very straightforward process. What we have decided, in our case is, look, we have wonderful franchisees in this network, and we feel like our aim is to really add value to everybody. Mm-hmm. Right. We're thinking entrepreneurially in that sense. So while we are trying to ultimately get to more than 50% of units signed up, at the same time, we're rolling out some webinars where we say, hey, here's something that's a pain point for everybody in the network. Here's a subject matter expert, a franchisee who's done like a really incredible job in this area, right? And just for kicks, listen to this person for an hour. We do it like for an hour a month that people can get on these webinars and just learn. And so this is something that we're just starting to roll out as a new franchisee association so that everybody feels, hey, for the little bit of money that I pay towards this effort, towards this association, I'm really getting many-fold return on that. So that's how we are thinking about it, really adding value.
What are some other value adds or the benefits of having that association? So it's what you just described. It's communicating with one voice. You're able to have attorneys kind of help negotiate with the franchisor. Anything else? Because those are, two really big things that you just mentioned. And I think a lot of franchisees would kind of be happy if they had that, if they had the right people doing it. If it's just to cause problems or, to rile things up, that's not good. Right. But if it's to speak as one voice and to be reasonable and to make the whole system better, that's good. Anything else that you see as beneficial of having an association?
Yeah, so many benefits, right? So if there's a platform, then usually people on the platform benefit each other, right? And so just by being in connection, being involved, receiving communication, will enable franchisees to learn best practices, to build their businesses stronger and not feel isolated in, random remote locations. In this city, I'm all by myself. I know a couple of franchisees in my region, but I have no idea what's happening, in other states. And being able to ultimately receive that information from franchisees and then redistribute it to everybody can be very powerful, particularly if for some reason that's not otherwise happening.
Well, I think this has been a really good discussion, just kind of talking about the differences between a franchise association and a franchisee advisory board. Hopefully there were some clear distinctions between the two and the benefits of both of them. Also, as a franchisee, the downsides of, possibly being a part of an advisory or a council, because there could be downsides depending on who's leading it and what the intentions are. So I think that was really important to talk about. Anything else that you would want to leave the audience with in relation to whether it's either one of those two things or just having good franchisor relationship?
Well, that's an interesting point, because my mind just went to the same thing that I just talked about, how powerful it is to learn from others, to find ways to just become even a little bit better. If you become a little bit better in 5 different areas of your life, it becomes exponential over time, right? And I just wanted to say thank you, because I love listening to your podcast. I love the work that you do, bringing franchisees together, investors together. So it's really manifold, but it's all circled around learning and contribution, right? And you're building this wonderful platform that I love to be a part of, where I'm learning so much every time that I listen to something, even if it's just like one nugget, and I implement it, it's worth so much. And so I just want to take a moment and say, thanks for all the work that you do for this community of franchisees of so many different brands. It's really powerful and beautiful, and I really appreciate it. I love the work you do.
I didn't even have to ask you to say anything like that.
No, you didn't.
Nice. That's great. It's fun to see things come full circle. People that have been in my world, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, come on the podcast. And I have some more people that I've known for a while, like yourself, that are coming on the podcast, and I'm doing more of that. I'm having guests with big names coming on, and then I have people that just know a lot, that I know, that I'm friends with, that are in my world, and we're connected outside of, just franchising. So it's really fun to have, people like you on, Alex, and people like you that are doing good things in the franchising community. It's fun to have you in the investor mastermind as well. Like, what would you say? Because a lot of people get into business because they want to go from employee to business owner to that entrepreneur, and ultimately to an investor. You're in the investor mastermind. Like, what would you say to some of these franchisees, franchisors that really want to get into the investor level? Like, what are some of the things that you've learned? What are some of the things that you are wanting to get grow in on the investor side of things?
Man, that's a great question, and I can only answer it subjectively from my end. I'm sure everybody is like on a different part of the journey, right? But the beauty is, if you just continue to learn, there's so much more to explore. And so, I joined the mastermind at a time where I realized I'm doing okay in business. I'm figuring things out, whether that be operations, marketing, all of those things. But even though I have an investment background, one of the things that I'm really ill-equipped for is taxes, right? And so if I just could, do the same work and figure out a few things that would help either protect assets a little better or save on taxes a little better by doing the same thing, spending the same money, but just doing it in a different and smart way, that could, take ultimately, with compounding effect, years off of my, needs to be involved in work and so forth. But I just love the game, right? I love the game of business. I just really enjoy the game. And ultimately, to me, this game is just a spiritual journey of who I'm becoming as a person. So, in that sense, like, what I wanted to get out was, how to become a better person and how to become a better investor as it comes to taxation. And so I feel like I'm learning a ton about that. And
getting introduced to the right people too. And I think it's really common for people out there. They think they have good, and I was talking about this. We had a mastermind session today, and I was mentioning this, like, people think they have good CPAs, good accountants, good taxation people that are helping them with stuff. But the more that I talk to people that have significant net worth, significant backgrounds in business, they have very weak tax strategy and very weak CPAs. Even though those CPAs may be CPAs of very well-respected, high net worth individuals, like what they're doing and how they're helping people is pretty weak. So, we've had Tom Wheelwright on this podcast. Go listen to the Tom Wheelwright. He's Rich Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's tax advisor, CPA. Go listen to that one. And he's got a way where you can, have his team check your taxes. And in the mastermind, we had Garrett Gunderson speak, and he's like, hey, I test my CPA every 2, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, he was awesome. Yeah. It was at last month's mastermind, but it gave me the permission and other people the permission it's okay to have other people look at your tax returns and be like, hey, what might they see that my CPA is missing right now? So I think just entrepreneurs out there, just because somebody else says you have a great CPA, like you probably want to be testing that out every few years, because what I'm seeing out there, most people have very weak CPAs and very poor on the tax mitigation strategies that
and reactive versus proactive. One of my favorite ones was Lee McCullough.
Yeah,
right. 3rd generation, like wills and trusts.
Yep.
And I had no idea about that subject, so I listened to this guys, I'm gobbling it up. I'm, making an appointment with them. I'm trying to figure out how can we structure things to just support life.
Yep.
And, what happens if I get hit by a truck tomorrow? Do I actually have that all in writing? So that was fabulous.
Yeah, asset protection, so important. And then we have somebody else coming into that Tribe of Investor Mastermind that's absolutely amazing on wills and trust, estate planning, asset protection. And so the point of it is, like in the mastermind, we have multiple people talk about different subjects because there's a lot of experts on these subjects, and they might disagree with each other at different times, and that's okay. Everyone listening, the point of this is like test out the advisors that you have and be open to new advisors and ask people, friends of yours, who they're using for tax strategy, wills and trusts and asset protection, because that's how you learn the game. Like you could join a mastermind, it's $25,000, or join the Tribe of Investor Mastermind, but at least get out there and start listening to Justin Donald's podcast, A Lifestyle Investor, and start learning and listen to other podcasts and start learning some of this stuff for free, because it's a game changer.
I tell you quick example. So just yesterday, I was meeting with a friend from my EO group here in Charlotte. So it's, entrepreneur, great guy. And he said, hey, who do you use for like family law? Well, what do you want to do? A will.
Yep.
And so we talked through, have you thought about like asset protection? And he was like, I have no idea. I just need a family lawyer to like write down what happens when I die, right? And I said, look, you run a company, all sorts of things can happen. You should consider just looking into that. And after our conversation, from what I learned on our mastermind, what I learned from Lee later, I was like, this is really helpful. Yep. And he walked away from that conversation realizing like, wow, here's something that I can also learn and become better at. And so it's a fun journey, man. And then sharing it, just like you do every day, it's just so beautiful, man. I appreciate your contribution to this entire industry and network. It's really wonderful.
Thank you, my friend. All right. Well, we'll wrap up this podcast. Thanks for coming on, Alex. Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.